Watch this.
Idaho voters said they wanted it 7 years ago, but Idaho lawmakers are about to make getting it a bit more difficult. It may not be a full repeal of Medicaid expansion, but it's enough to put the hurt on thousands of Idahoans' health care. How long can you be told you're not doing what you're supposed to do until you actually start doing it? For the state of Idaho, it's about 30 years. But is doing something about funding schools fully about financing or formulas, or both? I know, the snow is still sticking around from the last storm, but that doesn't mean we can't dump a little bit more on top of it. We have the timing on the next winter storm heading our way. Oh yeah, weather's getting some attention today on the 208. The house always wins. You've likely heard that if you've ever attempted to play craps at a casino. The phrase reinforces the idea of the odds usually being stacked against you. Well, stacked odds against you is something Republicans and Democrats are highlighting on House Bill 138 right now. It's not technically a repeal of Medicaid expansion, but it is a list of conditions for Idaho to keep it alive. 11 of them, to be exact. And critics of the bill say there's no way to meet all of them. Supporters, they just call them guardrails, mechanisms to keep Medicaid expansion from exploding the budget. Joe Paris listened in on the 3 hours of testimony this morning in the House Health and Welfare Committee.
Is Medicaid expansion worth the current cost in Idaho? That's the centerpiece of debate on House Bill 138.
Medicaid in our state is taking up almost 30% of our budget. Back in 2000, it was 17%.
Bill sponsor, Republican Representative Jordan Redmond, argues it's time to cut costs.
This bill does not repeal Medicaid expansion. It asks to work smarter and not harder. It stops waste and saves money. We need to keep waste under 5%.
What it does do is create 11 conditions and requirements that must be met. If even a single one is not, Medicaid expansion would end in Idaho. Those include a work requirement, an enrollment cap, a limit on how long a person can be on the program, and a suspension of automatic eligibility renewals. Some of those depend on the federal government agreeing to waivers. Those are essentially requests that states ask for to operate Medicaid differently than required by federal statute.
To me, this is the bullets in the gun to kind of force them a little bit, right? I think without that, I do think it could sit on a desk and not have any attention to it.
My concern is, again, that the bullets are in the gun, like you said. We got the gun pointed at ourselves, not at the bureaucrats. Why are we triggering a repeal rather than a legislative review where we could then say, nice, we got 6 of those, and that is a sweet improvement on the program?
Leads to a question. What is House Bill 138 really about? It all depends on who you ask.
This bill is 100% Medicaid expansion repeal. There is no credible scenario in which Medicaid expansion would survive the conditions put on it in this bill.
House Minority Leader Alana Rubel voted against advancing the legislation. She ended up in the minority after hours of debate and public testimony. Final vote was 8-7 in favor.
265 people were opposed and 8 in favor, and yet it passed out of committee.
That appeared to be a non-factor for some committee members who voted to send the legislation to the House floor. Republican Representative Tanya Burgoyne made the implication that she and other freshman lawmakers on the committee just didn't know enough.
There are 8 freshmen on this committee, 8 out of 15. I think it would be irresponsible of us not to turn to the institutional knowledge that is here in the body of the House, that has been here, that has a lot more insight than us 8 freshmen.
I don't know why we would even have committees. I mean, committees are supposed to be the first line of defense, where we are the only ones who hear all the public testimony. We are in a better position to make this decision than the people on the floor, who will not be hearing 3 hours plus of testimony. The people who get it on the floor are going to be looking at it 5 minutes before it gets to them.
The end result worries stakeholders in the healthcare world.
A disappointment and fear for the people of Idaho. The uncertainty of what this will do to Medicaid expansion.
Randy Johnson with the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network believes this sends a message to Idahoans and the thousands that will get a cancer diagnosis.
Go get a better job? That doesn't vibe with what we know that the Idaho people wanted when they voted for this overwhelmingly.
Now, supporters of the concept will argue that there are alternative solutions within the legislation to get Idahoans on private insurance, to save Idaho money, and to prevent a future that they, again, will believe they include a runaway budget. And the representative, the co-sponsor, Representative Redmond, says that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to take control back of the program. Brian, he says that he wants Idaho to have control over their fate, not the federal government, but it does take two to tango. As a reminder, Idaho only pays 10% of this program, federal government on the hook for 90%. The point was made in committee, though, that it's not just free federal dollars. Idahoans are federal taxpayers, too.
True. And this idea that just because it's your first year in the legislature, you're not supposed to know what you're talking about or voting on, that's kind of mind-boggling, too. You're there to represent the people that voted for you in there, so.
I know that there was some constituents very unhappy with that comment.
Yeah, especially given that 265 to very few in favor of it. All right. Thanks, Joe. Well, there's a pretty good chance Idaho's Senate will take up two separate school choice bills on the exact same day. One would be the Senate version, the one that would expand the Empowering Parents program and install a few more accountability guardrails. The other would be House Bill 93, the tax credit bill whose only accountability is a parent survey, which, as you can see right now, is currently being debated in a Senate committee. We dissected this bill last week when it barely made it out of the House Revenue and Taxation Committee. And in doing so, we got a lot of messages with the common refrain, how can we support public money for private school education when we aren't already adequately funding our public schools? We also got this message from Bill asking, what's the definition of a fully funding public education for K-12? Is there ever enough money? I guess the question is there a number? Well, it depends on who you ask. But if you do take it back a few years, like more than 30, we can tell you the Idaho legislature has not met that definition of fully funding public education, at least according to the Idaho Supreme Court. In 1990, there was a lawsuit filed on behalf of several Idaho school districts, challenging the constitutionality of Idaho's school funding mechanism. Basically, are lawmakers allocating enough money toward it like the Constitution says they should? The attorney at the time was Robert Huntley, a former Supreme Court justice himself. And the suit was appealed to the Supreme Court several times, in 1993, in 1996, and in 1998. And each time, the state's highest court decided, no, the legislature was not providing enough money to instruct Idaho K-12 students. The same case came back to the Supreme Court two more times. Only this time it was challenging the fact that the state wasn't putting enough money toward maintaining and building adequate school buildings. In 2005, the last time it came in front of the Supreme Court justices, they ruled the state was not meeting its constitutional duty to, quote, establish and maintain a general, uniform, and thorough system of public free common schools. So what's changed since then? Well, not enough, according to one of the Idaho Supreme Court justices who helped come to that conclusion in 2005. That'd be former Justice Jim Jones, who told us today what the court basically told the state 2 decades ago.
Do better, and you cannot rely on the local property tax. It has to be paid by the legislature. The legislature has never fulfilled its obligation from that time to the present time. They've taken a tiny step last year with House Bill 521. They said, well, we're going to come up with $2 billion over 10 years. Well, your station reported last year that West Ada is going to need $1.1 billion itself to service the kids of people who are moving in. And it's obvious that what the legislature has done is not going to cut it. It's not going to come anywhere near bringing those dilapidated buildings up to code and building new school buildings. A safe environment conducive to learning. Those are the key words.
Asked about a number, if there was ever a goal assigned to what would be adequate funding, Justice Jones points to a recent article in ProPublica.
And it kind of gave the idea that we had to do at least double what we're doing now, both on the instructional side and on the facilities side. Just take what you're doing now and double it, and you might be in the ballpark.
That's a big pill to swallow for a lot of people in the State House.
If you educate your kids properly, the return on the investment is going to be tremendous.
Okay, so in 2005, you were part of that Supreme Court that made that decision, and you were on the Supreme Court up through 2017. And if you saw that the state legislature wasn't basically following the orders and doing what they're supposed to do to adequately fund education, why didn't anybody say anything from the court's perspective?
Well, the court has got to wait for somebody to bring a case before it. We can't just sort of, look at the situation and say, well, gee, somebody needs to do something about that. The plaintiffs were left with the opportunity to come back and say that it wasn't being done. That didn't happen.
But you're thinking somebody could soon.
I think that could happen. And
if they do you think the outcome would still be the same?
I think that you could put on a really good case that the state is not meeting its responsibility either on the instructional side or on the facility side. That may be a pipe dream, but I think that something like that has to happen. You have to tell these people graphically that they're not doing their job. That's one of the main things that they have, that the legislature has under the Constitution, to make a uniform and thorough system of public education. They haven't done it.
And I'm not really sure what another lawsuit would do, since they didn't really listen since 2005, as you heard Justice Jones says. He regrets not requiring or putting in some sort of mechanism, Justice Jones told us today, or some sort of monitor that would make sure the state fulfills its duty. Something like, Kids Learning Index set up by experts to make sure the schools are getting what they need. And that idea may not be far off, though. We took Bill's question to Idaho's Superintendent of Public Instruction, Debbie Critchfield, because there is a slew of numbers that show Idaho is still not spending enough on education. We rank 40th when it comes to average teacher pay, about $63,000 a year. We remain last when it comes to per student spending, about $9,800 a year. We have an $80 million funding gap in special education. In 2022, the Office of Performance Evaluations put out a study showing it would cost the state $847 million just to get Idaho school buildings up to good condition. Also in 2022, there were $1 billion in bond requests on ballots across the state. This year, Superintendent Critchfield is asking for nearly $3 billion to be put toward public education, which would be an increase of just under 3% over last year. But as she told us today, there's an equal faction to this funding question, and it isn't just about how much money we put in.
We hear a lot, hey, we need more money, we need more money. And I think it's okay to ask the question, well, at what point do we say that's enough? Because no government can sustain just this trajectory of growth where we're just constantly dumping in more money, but we feel like, is it going where we want it to go? Do we have the outcomes that we have? The legislature will say, well, we appropriated more money in the last 5 years than we've ever put into education. That is in fact true. Then our district and school charter leaders say, we're not getting all the money that was appropriated. That is also true, because the funding mechanism is so outdated for the needs of the modern classroom that money that is put into the public schools budget ends up getting left on the table because there's not a mechanism to send it out based on the types of kids that are in the classrooms.
What do you mean?
So we're sending it out based on support units, not based on kids. So we're saying if you have 1,000 students in your district, we're going to send you enough money for 700 of those people. Well, our districts are saying, but we still have fixed cost. But the line items that are in the public schools budget only allow you to use the money according to how that money was put into place 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So we haven't gone back to say the money that's been appropriated and that we're giving to districts, is it being used in the way that we need it now? Is it aligned to the priorities that we have now? My answer to that is no, but no part of the budget takes into account that some students cost more. But the current system says, regardless of how much it costs to educate the kids in your community, we're going to keep sending you the same amount of money, and we're never going to change. And that's what we've got to fix.
Is taking $50 million out of the general fund that could go toward education, say with a school choice tax credit, how is that helping?
I don't think it helps any of the places that the state funds. That takes away from roads, that takes away from jails, it takes away from education. I can see why for some that's an attractive way to do it, because you say, well, I didn't take it out of the public schools budget. Well, that's true, but it also wasn't available for the public schools budget. Do we expect that we'll need to put more money into the public education budget? Absolutely. But where we put it and how we send it out is almost more important than the number that's coming in.
So bottom line, yes, Idaho can direct more money to public schools, and a $50 million hit to the tax revenue isn't quite going to help that. But we can also update the funding formula to make sure the money is going where it needs to go, according to Critchfield. For example, Superintendent Critchfield told us back in 2022, when we had a large surplus of money, a lot of that coming in from COVID, the governor signed off on a $300 million increase in school spending, the largest in state history at the time. But she told us 165 million of that 300 million remained locked away because of the outdated formula and requirements to get that money out of that bucket. Antiquated boxes to check and language like how the state determines funding for the number of people needed to serve students in a certain district, those, what you call them, district support units, as they call it. Listen to this. Divide the actual average daily attendance, excluding students approved for inclusion in the exceptional child educational program, divided by the appropriate divisor from the tables of support units in this section, then add the quotients to obtain. It just goes on, and it's a lot of math. Superintendent Critchfield, she wants to change this. She says she's planning on bringing a bill to the State House tomorrow to start changing some of the ways the state sends money to schools. Because, as she says, putting money in the account, it's a big part of it. But getting the legislature to stop rigging the system against the kids is just as big. All right, apologies, but we do have a few more legislative loose ends to tie up in the 411 today. And to do that, here's Adriel Tackett.
It's crystal clear that I would say, much of our COVID response was unscientific, unjustified, and frankly absurd.
This isn't about whether masks work or whether they don't. It's about usurping local control. And it's about even borderline disrespect of local control.
2 COVID bills hit Senate State Affairs today. First up, banning mask mandates. This would only apply to state agencies and political subdivisions, so medical professionals don't have to worry. The bill passed and heads to the Senate floor for debate. Second is the resolution saying Dr. Anthony Fauci's pardon by former President Joe Biden doesn't protect him from prosecution in Idaho, which is already the case. That also passed and heads to the Senate. The Boise School District is making strides in mental health. They now have 4 new social workers and a full-time counselor for online and specialty programs. Recent data from their student well-being survey revealed decreases in both student suicide thoughts and depression rates. And that's the 411 on the 208. I'm Adriel Tackett.
right, congratulations, Southwest Idaho. You made it through our first single-digit morning in over a year. Boise, Nampa, Mountain Home, all down to 5 degrees this morning. Not much warmer for Jerome and Twin Falls. Ontario, you dipped below 0 with -1 this morning. And check out Stanley, 33 below early this morning. And temperatures have climbed into the mid-20s across most of the Snake Plain. Sitting right now, though, in the single digits up in Sun Valley and McCall. A beautiful looking day, but it's the kind of day you'll want to enjoy from the inside looking out, especially if you forget that warm gear, as it's been a very frigid day. Both morning lows, afternoon highs about 20 degrees colder than is typical for the middle of February. Good news is tomorrow afternoon into Friday, the Arctic air gets sent packing. So here's our Arctic air mass. This will start moving to the northeast as this winter storm we've been anticipating will be on the move tonight into early tomorrow. So while we don't see the cold air in place after tomorrow, we do have another single-digit start Thursday morning, and then a winter storm warning goes into effect starting at 5 o'clock tomorrow for the Treasure and Magic Valleys through Friday morning for accumulating snow at all elevations. Snow and wind, our biggest storm impacts tomorrow. As early as 10 a.m. here in Boise, we'll likely see the flakes flying. The snow will stick almost instantly to our frozen roadways. We're talking anywhere from 3 to up to 8 inches across the Treasure Valley. The further west you go from Boise, the higher those snow totals will get. 6 to 12 inches in the mountains. Again, heaviest period of snow for the Treasure Valley is midday tomorrow. Pushes up precipitation, though, will linger through the day on Friday. And wind tomorrow, we're talking 35 to 45 mile per hour wind gusts. That could create limited visibility. Blowing snow will be a big concern as you're traveling tomorrow. So if you don't have to be out and about Thursday into early Friday, I'd avoid it if you could. First alert weather conditions through Friday morning. Temperatures do hit 40 by Friday afternoon. Your Valentine's Day, we dry out Saturday, then more snow and rain comes in for the President's Day weekend.
All right, got so many messages. Been trying to filter through all of them. Let's get to as many as we can. Like this one from Mikkel. As a retired oncology RN, I can tell you, Medicaid expansion has saved lives. Prior to this, I would have patients with possible curative treatment opting out of that treatment so they wouldn't burden their families with the financial burden. Repealing it would actually cost us money and lives, not saving money, according to McCall there. Freshman legislators need to do their job if they're on a committee. That's the whole point of committee assignments, for them to do in-depth analysis. Shaking her head, Sue is in Meridian. That's a good point. I mean, that's why you're there, is to kind of look into these bills. You get them ahead of time, look into it, ask questions if you don't know the answer. That's what the committee hearing is about. It's obvious education is not and has not been a priority in our state. The only priority of the GOP is to cut taxes so they can get reelected every 2 years. All at the expense of our children's education, says Steve. Mark Peterson in Middleton. My wife and I are Idaho natives, but thank goodness we left the state to earn a professional living and educated our daughters where schools were a priority. Well, that's a big deal. Only when Idaho is ranked #1 nationally in education should we say we've spent adequately, says Mark. I don't know that we have to go that far. I think we just need to fulfill the requirement of saying, do we have what we need? Are the school districts getting the money they need to have a proper building and to have better teachers or the best teachers? And then, of course, making sure that we get the learning done that is supposed to be done. Protect the unborn child so they can grow up with a third world education. That's what Fred wants to know. We'll see you tomorrow.
Continue with us and watch free now on the KTVB Plus app everywhere you stream.